Welcome to my channel, and today I want to share a story that will take you deep into the mountains of Africa, where a young woman's life is torn apart by lies, betrayal, and a family that believes she is cursed. And yet against all odds, she discovers strength, truth, and unexpected love. This story is about Amina, a girl declared barren and sold as if she were nothing more than property, and Kamau, a mysterious mountain guardian whose grief and knowledge become her lifeline. Together, they confront danger, uncover a cruel network exploiting young women, and fight to reclaim justice, survival, and hope. Stay with me, because this story will grip your heart and challenge everything you think you know about courage and resilience. The red clay squelched beneath Amina's worn sandals as her father's calloused hand pressed heavily on her shoulder, holding her in place like livestock ready for auction. At 19, standing in the dusty yard of her family's homestead in the rolling hills of eastern Kenya, she felt the weight of every whispered judgment from the gathering villagers. Barren as dry season soil, some muttered. 3 failed suitors already. A curse follows her everywhere. Her mother lingered at the doorway, unable to meet her daughter's eyes, and her younger siblings peeked through the small wooden shutters with expressions that were tangled mixtures of relief and guilt. Relief that the burden would be lifted, guilt that they felt that relief at all. The man who would take her, the one who had come from the mountains at dawn, was tall and imposing, with skin dark as the richest ebony and eyes pale as the early morning sky. His name was Kamau. Few words had passed his lips since arriving. Strong hands, weathered by years of labor, held the reins of his pack animals with practiced ease. "She is strong," her father said with a voice that trembled just slightly. "Good with cattle, won't give you trouble." Kamau's gaze lingered on Amina. Not with the dismissal she had expected, but with an intensity that saw through the shame, the whispers, and the lies everyone else carried. Silver coins passed hands, and the arrangement was sealed. "Gather your things," her father muttered, but Amina had already packed a small canvas bag. 3 faded dresses, her mother's tattered shawl, a small collection of pressed flowers she had gathered as a child. Everything left of the life she was about to abandon. Kamau led a chestnut mare, better fed and groomed than any Amina had seen in her village. She mounted the saddle with the skill her father had taught her years ago. Tears of anger burning behind her eyes, not for sadness, but for the fury of being traded like property, the lies of her supposed infertility, and the cruel injustice of her fate. The mountain trail ahead wound through dense forests and rocky ridges, clouds gathering above as rain began to fall. Kamau spoke little, only enough to direct the journey, and offered her jerky from his pack without waiting to be asked. Nightfall brought shelter, warmth from a carefully tended fire, and a quiet that made her suspicious. Kindness felt foreign after a lifetime of whispers and disdain. By the 3rd morning, strange sensations in her body hinted at changes she could not yet name. Kamau noticed immediately, offering remedies with a knowledge that went beyond survival skills. Herbs, teas, careful observations of her movements and pulse. 3 days later, they arrived at his homestead nestled in a clearing surrounded by towering acacia and baobab trees. A well-built dwelling with corrals and livestock pens that spoke of prosperity. Inside, books lined a wall, not farming guides, but texts on medicine and herbal remedies. Kamau moved with quiet precision, tending the animals, maintaining the land, preparing meals that nourished her in ways she could not fully understand. He offered her the better quarters, taking the smaller space for himself, and Amina saw for the first time a man who carried his grief silently, yet extended care and respect in every action. Over the following days, as the mountain winds swept across the highlands, Amina began to recognize the early signs her body had been trying to tell her, a truth the midwives in her village had declared impossible. Kamau observed her with quiet intensity, not prying but aware, guiding her gently through the unfamiliar experience. Outside, the world pressed in, uninvited visitors, debts, whispers of danger. But inside the homestead, a fragile sense of safety and trust began to form. Here, among the peaks and the forest, far from the village that had condemned her, Amina confronted the possibility that the truths she had been told were lies, and with that, the first faint glimmers of hope began to grow. fragile as the buds of the wildflowers she had pressed into her childhood book. By the fourth morning, Amina felt a peculiar queasiness rolling through her body, exhaustion that sleep could not erase, senses sharper than usual, and a fullness in her chest that left her unsettled. Kamau noticed immediately, pale eyes following her every movement with careful concern, and offered ginger root, instructing her to chew slowly, as though he had anticipated every symptom and prepared for them in advance. The climb to his homestead had been arduous, but nothing prepared her for the strange combination of fear and awe she now felt in his presence. Here was a man whose grief had been forged in loss, whose knowledge of the human body went far beyond what any villager could imagine, yet who treated her with an unexpected tenderness. As she recovered from the climb and the unsettling realization of her body's signals, Kamau guided her through the daily rhythms of mountain life. Tending cattle, checking corrals, fetching water from the spring that tumbled down jagged rocks, and preparing meals that soothed her stomach and fortified her spirit. The homestead itself was a revelation, with hand-carved furniture, a sturdy hearth, and shelves lined with books not of farming or livestock, but of medicine, herbal lore, and anatomical studies. It struck Amina that the man she had been sent to as a supposed barren girl was far more than the villagers imagined, a guardian of knowledge and skill hidden beneath his solemn exterior. On the third evening, the first hints of what she dared not yet name settled into her mind. The nausea, the exhaustion, the way certain smells repelled her while others seemed magnified. All pointed to a truth the midwives had denied. She was with child. The realization arrived with terror, disbelief, and a fierce spark of vindication. For if this was true, then every lie about her infertility, every whispered curse, every betrayal by her own family had been based on falsehoods. Kamau watched quietly as she grappled with the truth, his gaze steady, understanding more than he let on, his hands moving with the precision of someone trained to heal. Then, without warning, 3 men appeared at the edge of the clearing as the sun dipped behind the peaks, their horses kicking up clouds of dust, their eyes calculating, their posture commanding. They were not ordinary visitors, and their presence carried the implicit threat that Amina's newfound sanctuary might not endure. The leader, a lean man with sharp features, dismounted and called out, demanding to speak with her, his voice carrying through the crisp mountain air. "We come for the girl. Your family owes debts." Kamau stepped onto the porch, blocking the cabin, his stance firm, protective. He would not allow intrusion, not negotiation, not discussion. Tension rippled through the air as the men set up camp near the corrals, the wind carrying their impatience across the clearing. Amina pressed her hands instinctively to her stomach, the timeline of her body's symptoms making perfect sense now. She was indeed pregnant, and this simple fact rendered all the villagers' accusations, all the supposed curses, all the humiliating diagnoses meaningless. She was not barren. She had been lied about, sold because of lies, targeted perhaps because of her sharp mind and her dangerous curiosity. Kamau's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts, calm yet urgent. "These men are not ordinary creditors. They are part of something much larger, a network that exploits young women." Her mind raced, the implications staggering. The accusations, the shame, the family's betrayal, all woven into a system that profited from deception, fear, and the silence of those who asked too many questions. Snow began falling lightly as the first storm approached the mountains, and the small homestead became a fortress in the making. Kamau checked his medical supplies, prepared for complications, and worked to stabilize Amina as her panic and stress threatened the fragile balance of her pregnancy. The visitors' leader, whose name Amina would soon learn was Oba, demanded entry, threats layering over each other with increasing aggression, but Kamau's resolve did not waver. "You will not touch her," he said quietly, but with unshakable authority, moving to place himself between Amina and the intruders. Outside, the storm intensified, snow turning the mountains into a white labyrinth that trapped them all within the clearing. Inside, Kamau administered care with the calm confidence of a trained healer. Herbs and medications blended with clinical precision, every movement measured to protect both mother and child. Amina felt the weight of the moment. The mountain winds, the snow, the threat outside, The strange, intense connection with the man who had saved her from the lies of her own family, and the tiny life growing within her. A life that symbolized truth, resilience, and the defiance of every falsehood ever spoken about her. As night deepened, the storm's fury cloaked the world in white, and within the cabin, Amina and Kamau faced the first battle of many, against forces that sought to control, exploit, and silence, yet found themselves confronting a determination that could not be broken, guided by knowledge, courage, and the unwavering protection of one who had been forged by grief but renewed by purpose. As the storm raged over the mountain peaks, snow and wind cutting through the valley like sharp knives, the three men outside, Oba and his two companions, grew increasingly bold, pounding on doors, rattling windows, and testing every barrier that Kamau had prepared with meticulous care. Inside, Amina's fear surged, her body responding to the stress with sharp cramps and sudden bleeding that sent panic racing through her chest, and Kamau moved with the swift, confident precision of a healer who had seen life and death in his hands, clearing the table, preparing supplies, and guiding her through controlled breathing to stabilize both mother and child. Each moment was a trial of endurance, the storm outside masking the howls of the wind and the mounting aggression of the intruders, while inside, Kamau's calm authority held the room in tense equilibrium. "Lie down, breathe slowly," he instructed, his hands checking her pulse, adjusting herbs and compounds with exact care, the combination of modern medical knowledge and mountain remedies, ensuring her survival where panic could have been fatal. Amina's mind raced with revelations, the lies of her family, the whispered accusations of infertility, the network of men who exploited young women under the guise of debt or shame, all converging into a terrifying clarity as her pregnancy, the undeniable proof of life she carried, became both a personal vindication and evidence of a criminal system. Oba's voice thundered against the walls, demanding compliance, threatening violence, but Kamau's presence was an unyielding shield. His knowledge of medicine, strategy, and the terrain combined into a formidable defense, every action precise, every word measured to protect Amina without escalating unnecessary risk. The hours passed like days, the storm intensifying, snow piling against doors and windows, isolating them from the world beyond. And inside, a fragile routine emerged. Kamau monitoring her symptoms, administering remedies, preparing for every conceivable complication. And Amina slowly finding the courage to breathe through fear, pain, and the overwhelming weight of betrayal and revelation. The mountain homestead became a crucible of survival and truth, where Amina realized that her life and the life she carried were no longer defined by the lies of her village, her family, or the midwives who had condemned her. She was part of something larger now, protected by knowledge, resilience, and a man who had been forged by grief, yet chosen to stand for life and justice. As night gave way to a grey dawn, the storm showed no sign of relenting, and Oba's impatience turned to desperation. His threats escalating as he tried to force entry, but Kamau's preparations held firm, reinforced doors, hidden supplies, and carefully positioned defensive measures, turning the cabin into a bastion against the men who sought to exploit her. Inside, Amina lay on the bed, weak but alive, her body responding to Kamau's expert care, and in that moment, the trust between them solidified into something unspoken but absolute. She was not alone. She was seen. She was protected, and the life growing inside her was proof that truth and perseverance could endure even in the face of calculated cruelty. The snowstorm continued through the valley, a cloak of isolation that shielded them from immediate danger, yet heightened every risk, every decision carrying consequences for both mother and child. Kamau moved with relentless focus, balancing the immediate medical needs with the long-term strategy of survival and the eventual confrontation with the network that had trafficked countless girls like her, the realization sharpening Amina's resolve. Fear giving way to determination, the mountain and its fury becoming both challenge and shield, a stage upon which courage, knowledge, and life itself were measured. And as they prepared for whatever dawn might bring, a fragile sense of hope took root, intertwined with the storm, the danger, and the undeniable proof of her own resilience. The beating heart within her chest, the life she would fight to protect. and the man beside her whose grief had become their shared strength. Dawn broke over the snow-clad peaks, the storm easing only enough to reveal the relentless determination of Oba and his men as they renewed their assault on the cabin. Axes striking reinforced doors, their voices shouting threats that carried across the White Valley. But Kamau stood firm, every movement precise and measured, shielding Amina as he coordinated their defense, while inside, her body still bore the consequences of fear and stress, cramps and bleeding reminding them both of the fragility of life and the stakes of their struggle. With unwavering calm, Kamau moved between her and the intruders, his medical bag within reach, but his focus entirely on protection. His knowledge of obstetrics and emergency care transforming the cabin into both fortress and sanctuary, as outside the attackers' frustration mounted against the barriers he had prepared, their impatience sharpened by the isolation of the mountains. Amina, weak, yet determined, watched him with awe. The man who had arrived as a mountain stranger, now the guardian of her body, her child and her future, and as she realized the depth of his preparation, hidden documents detailing the network that had trafficked girls like her medical evidence, and strategic contingency plans. She understood that their struggle was not just for survival, but for justice against a system built on lies, exploitation, and cruelty. The first breach came as the door splintered under repeated blows, but Kamau's swift response, using both his knowledge and the natural fortifications of the cabin, turned their attack into chaos. Snow blowing through the cracks, walls fortified with furniture and hidden supplies creating obstacles that slowed the intruders' advance, while Kamau administered care to Amina with steady hands, herbs and medical instruments blending seamlessly with his protective strategy, stabilizing her bleeding and easing her panic even as the sounds of destruction filled the cabin. Oba pressed forward, his arrogance meeting Kamau's unyielding resolve, mocking the value of a woman in his eyes while failing to see the truth he had underestimated. Amina was not property, she was life, and Kamau's combination of grief-honed resolve, medical expertise, and strategic foresight made them unstoppable in defense of her and the child she carried. With each moment, Amina's understanding of her own strength grew, the fear transforming into a fierce determination to survive and to witness the collapse of the network that had destroyed so many lives before hers. Then, as Oba prepared for a final push, the distant sound of hoofbeats echoed across the valley, and 6 mounted figures appeared through the swirling snow. Led by a grizzled marshal whose presence carried authority and experience, the law riding hard through the storm to enforce justice, and Kamau's preparations revealed their ultimate purpose. Every route down the mountain monitored, every piece of evidence meticulously documented and hidden, every contingency considered, all orchestrated to bring the criminals to account. The attackers froze, the illusion of control shattering as the law approached, and within moments, the network's reach was dismantled. Oba and his companions subdued and arrested, their arrogance replaced by disbelief as the evidence of trafficking, corruption, and murder was revealed in precise detail. While inside, Kamau tended to Amina, her bleeding stopped, her vital signs stable, and the child within her safe. The storm passed, leaving a crystalline world of snow and sunlight. And as the law secured the perpetrators and began organizing the evidence, Amina and Kamau finally had a moment to breathe, to acknowledge the bond forged through shared struggle. Grief transformed into purpose, and a life saved against all odds. Her family's lies no longer defined her. The network that had exploited others dismantled, and the mountains that had seemed hostile now became a place of sanctuary, a testament to resilience, courage, and the power of knowledge applied with love and determination. Kamau looked at her. His expression softened, no longer haunted, but resolute, offering her a choice: to leave and reclaim any life she desired, or to stay and continue the work they had begun together, protecting and assisting those who, like her, had been silenced and endangered by lies, ignorance, and greed. Amina, feeling the first stirrings of pride, relief, and hope, chose to stay, to use her mind, her heart, and her growing experience to aid other young women, guided by the man who had become both protector and partner. And together, they faced the mountains with purpose. The echoes of injustice replaced by a promise of care, justice, and the triumph of truth. A life rebuilt on trust, knowledge, and the undeniable strength of human resilience. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. Amina's journey reminds us that strength, truth, and courage can rise even from the deepest betrayal, and that hope can flourish in the most unexpected places. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales that touch the heart and challenge the mind. And remember, every challenge we face can reveal the strength we never knew we had. See you in the next story. If you like this story, make sure you subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share with your friends and family so you don't miss the next powerful story coming your way. Drop a heart in comment, like and subscribe my channel, and visit my channel for more interesting story videos.